morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the Global Peace Foundation. Thank you to the Philippines. It's wonderful to be here, and it's an honor to be amongst you this morning. I would like to also point out to my good friend Imam Talib that he mentioned that he was the only religious person on this panel, and I just want to point out I am a man of faith. So I join you, my brother.
It's my job.
I know, it's not my job. But I do want to make that point. He also instructed us that we only had 12 minutes. And so I told him I was going to keep my comments to 10 so that I could donate the remainder of the time to you all to ask questions. So please think of those questions, and we look forward to a very dynamic session of questions and answers after this. My goal is really, I'm going to share 2 points, and that is I'm going to talk about radicalization, and then I'm going to talk about what you, each individual in this room can do about that wherever you find yourself. And that can be, you can be men of faith, women of faith, you can be civic leaders, you can be a citizen, but there is a role for you in countering violent extremism. Governments cannot accomplish the goals, and so we'll talk about that. Radicalization. Why would a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old who has an amazing life ahead of them, why would they decide to get on an airplane and fly from the United States to Syria to join ISIS? 2008, Zachary Adam Chesser graduated from Oakton High School in Northern Virginia, a very wealthy area of Fairfax County, very affluent. 2 years later, the same young man, married to a Ugandan woman with child, gets arrested at JFK Airport in New York City, trying to fly to Somalia to join Al-Shabaab. That same year, my son matriculated into Oakton High School, the same high school Zachary Chesser graduated from. The same high school that traditionally every year flirts with the top 100 spot in the entire United States, one of the top 100 high schools. So think about the promise that could come from graduates coming from a program that strong academically. Why would somebody throw that away? These are some of the things that professionals struggle with in order to identify who is likely to resonate with those ideas that groups like Al-Shabaab, ISIS, others are putting out. How is it that that connects with young men and women, and increasingly more women? In 2012, the Homeland Security Committee reported to Congress, so this is only 2 years after Zachary Chesser is arrested, that the only way to counter radicalization is with a whole-of-society approach. A whole-of-society approach. Now, in government parlance, frequently people speak about whole-of-government. And what that means is there's not just a military solution. There's not just a diplomatic solution. It requires all agencies of government working together to achieve the goals. Whole of society is much broader than that. That goes beyond government. That goes to faith communities. That goes to civil society. That goes to families. That goes to citizens. That's all of us in this room. The indicators of radicalization are pretty well documented. And so the first step is, how do I understand? How do I identify somebody who might be on the road to radicalization? If we look to Canada, Phil Gursky has been operating in this area for quite some time, both as a practitioner as well as now in academia, and lists indicators like rejecting different interpretations of Islam, isolation from non-Muslims or former friends, sudden increase in religiosity, condemning Western ways of life, especially democracy, homosexuality, gender equality, condemning Western foreign policy, characterizing it as an anti-Muslim crusade, desire to travel to conflict zones, obsession with jihadist websites, Al-Qaeda, ISIS ideology, martyrdom, the end of times. In France, they have a website called Stop Jihadism. They have indicators: letting go of old friends, rejecting family, big changes in habits, abandoning school or profession, abrupt change in musical tastes, changes in television or movie preferences, discontinuing sports activities, disapproving of modern female clothing, frequenting radical social media. Now, some of you might be sitting there and say, that sounds like normal teenage behavior, some of those things. How many people have teenagers out there? Raise your hand. Or used to have a teenager, or have a pending teenager. These are things parents worry about, right? Changing preferences, television preferences, that sounds normal. But when you start to consolidate multiple indicators, then it should be cause for concern. And parents that understand that can seek out resources that are available to try to understand it. They can seek out imams, they can seek out other faith leaders who might be able to talk. But there are very few people, actually, in many societies that have the understand. I know definitely in the United States, there are few people who understand the politics of what's going on, say, in the Middle East with respect to the Islamic State, and also have a background in psychiatry or social work, and can combine those skills in a way that can actually do an intervention that would prevent somebody who's on the road to radicalization from crossing legal thresholds. And that's one of the challenges that we have in the United States, is we don't have a lot of other tools, a lot of other components. And so the one tool, law enforcement, waits until somebody crosses that legal threshold, and then the hammer falls and they go to jail. That, my friends, is not a good solution for how to counter radicalization, and which is why a whole of society approach is necessary. So what can we do? What can you do? What can each individual in this room do about such an immense challenge to many of our countries, to the world? Well, the first thing that I would recommend is we heard Terry Lewis yesterday speak with Jimmy Jam up on stage. And what did he say? He said, get involved. He said, be a bright light. This is not a spectator sport. As a matter of fact, democracy is not a spectator sport. How many people live in a democracy in the audience? Please raise your hand if you live in a democracy. Democracy flourishes with active citizenship. It requires you to engage on issues. And so what we need to do is we need to listen to some of the panelists who spoke yesterday as well, and they talked about imagining a future beyond our current reality. When we were talking about the Korean Peninsula, right? Imagining a united Korea. Well, why is that not possible? Imagine a world without ISIS, but not only ISIS will be defeated militarily. That's just a matter of time. The ideology is a decades-long problem, and that requires all of us to engage in countering these radical ideas. Dr. Moon mentioned employing a moral framework for leadership, and we all need to consider how we do that, because we are all leaders As a citizen, you are a leader. That's a requirement of democracy. Technology is a component as well. My colleague at RAND, Elizabeth Bowden, did a study of Twitter use and ISIS. And what did she find? Well, 2/3 of all tweets on social media within the term of the study that she did were positive. They were people resisting that narrative. That's not commonly heard in the media today. But it's important. You need to know that that helps. You can join organizations, nonprofits, faith communities, others that are working to intervene and counter radical ideas. You can help sensitize people you know who work in law enforcement, who are judges, who are lawyers, that there are other alternatives besides just a legal approach. You can encourage and amplify groups that promote those counter-narratives. For example, tomorrow, a new song is going to be unveiled about reunification of the Korean Peninsula. That song will only be as good as all of us in this room make it. We cannot be passive consumers. We need to promote and help that idea get legs and get out to others who were not fortunate enough to be here with us in this conference. There are lots of other ideas, and I hope we can explore them during questions and answers. But I'm going to yield whatever time I have remaining to the audience. Thank you very much.